Okay, well, welcome everybody. Good day, good afternoon, and welcome to our Gimmal education session. My name is Marcia Shields, and I'm from our customer success team. Our goal for these sessions are to enhance your expertise with your Gimmal software. Tim, next slide, please. Tim Butler is with me. He's going to be your subject matter expert today, talking about Gimmal Physical. Tim's going to be reviewing the new disposition workflows that were added as part of our 4.0 release. These sessions are typically 30 minutes. Today might be an exception and will probably run longer because there's a lot of material to cover. But if you aren't able to stay the whole time, if we do run long, don't worry. We are recording the session and will be shared after the event. Questions are always welcomed. You can see on this, if you look at the bottom of your Zoom bar, there's a Q&A area. I'd ask if you have any questions while Tim is talking, please drop them in there. I'll be monitoring that and I'll bring them up to Tim after the demonstration part. Thank you. And yes, so before we get to kick things really off, I'd like to congratulate Rob Bedridis. He is our first Gimmal All-Star. Thanks for being such a great part of our Gimmal community, Rob. Rob got this coveted award because he reached 3,000 points, and this is by registering, joining, and doing any post-education session surveys that we have. Many others are close, so you'll probably be seeing more names on this soon. Before I hand things over to Tim, I'm going to launch a quick poll if you all could help out here. Today's poll is relative to the topic, and we'd love to know what you think. The question today is, what do you find to be most frustrating about the physical records disposition process? So I'm going to let that run so we don't waste any more time from the demonstration, but I'll share results out later, and as more people roll in, those results will change. So Tim, I think that's all I have. I'm going to hand things over to you.
Good. Thanks, Marcia. Appreciate it. Yeah, guys. And normally I've got to squeeze stuff into about 20 minutes on these webinars, and there's just no way it's going to happen today. So if you can only stay for the 20 or 30 minutes, okay, look at the recording afterwards. But I am available to stay as long as you guys want afterwards for any questions. We will reserve time for Q&A at the end, as Marcia indicated, and I will definitely go past the normal 20 minutes. There's just a lot of material to cover. I hope you'll find it useful. We're actually pretty excited about this. That what we're looking at today, guys, the disposition process and the functionality we've built into the products surrounding that, probably the most significant enhancement we've put into the software in about 10 years. So pretty excited to see how it's received. Most of you, I think, know this, and this is always the case now. We've been doing this for quite a long time, and frankly, our best ideas for improving things come from you all. So what we're looking at today, virtually everything you'll see in terms of improvements came from one of you, one or more of you. So we always welcome that. Please feel the freedom to continue to offer up suggestions. We're pretty thick-skinned. You can critique it and say, oh man, that's not good. We just want as much feedback from you as we possibly can. So with that, we're going to look at the disposition process now in Gimmal Physical. Now, you are looking at version 4.0, just recently brought to market. I know there's quite a queue of you guys in line to get this upgrade. Most of you are not familiar with this interface. Won't have time to go into all the interface changes today because we are going to focus on disposition, but just be aware this is what the product now looks like. Now, the foundations, guys, of the new disposition functionality really is centered on 3 different tabs in the application. 2 of them entirely new. None of you have had these tabs previously. We're going to touch upon each one of them. There's a Workflows tab. There's a Workflow Steps tab. And then a tab that all of you, I think, are familiar with, a Record Schedule tab. You may have called it something different, but it's the tab that houses the rules for how long you're supposed to keep stuff. These 3 tabs taken together, they are the foundation for how the new disposition functionality works. To that end, guys, we're going to start here on the Workflows tab. Now, what I've done in my demo application is I've pre-created 4 different workflows. A couple of points you should be aware of. Unlike most tabs in Gimmal Physical, where you actually have the freedom, in conjunction with Gimmal Client Success to design the tab any way you want. Not true of these two tabs. These tabs pretty much are what they are. They're going to be used the way they are. We will undoubtedly continue to enhance these tabs in the future with new versions. But for now, please be aware when you do upgrade to 4.0, you're going to have these two tabs pretty much with the fields that you see here. Workflows. Overall, guys, there are four sort of logical different types of workflows that are applicable to physical records. That number may eventually grow, but on the whole, we're looking at four logical outcomes here. Going to go through them quickly. The first type or flavor of workflow, if you will, is what we have called standard. I will also say here, guys, when you upgrade, you'll have this tab. You will also have this row of data. Part of the upgrade will include giving you the standard workflow. That will reflect what you have now in your version of Gimmal Physical, or for the older clients, in Infolinks. Basically, guys, in the product, the version up until 4.0, there was only one workflow. You could actually vary the number of approvals in the workflow, but on the whole, it was one type of workflow. That same workflow applied to all of your records, regardless of which record series or schedule they were associated to. So unless for just a few of you that had some custom work done, it was one workflow across the enterprise. So in order just to accommodate that, when you upgrade, the product will ship with the standard workflow. Other flavors are going to be available. Explicit sequential. Let me just quickly describe that, and then we'll look at it in a little more detail. Explicit sequential, by the way, I've named it that personally. You don't have to name it that. I've just named it something to hopefully make it a little more intuitive. But the idea here, guys, is if you want to, if you in your internal processes require more than one approval at end of life for the disposition process, and you want those approvals to be executed in a particular order, you will create a flavor of workflow that I've called explicit sequential. So just to summarize, you're going to want multiple approvals and you're going to want them in a particular order. Flavor number 3, up here at the top, explicit parallel. Really sort of the same thing as explicit sequential, in the sense that you're going to want multiple approvals at end of life before you disposition. But hopefully, as you can tell by the name of the workflow, the order of receipt is not important. As long as you get your 4 approvals, you don't care what order they come in, that would be an explicit parallel flavor. Number 4, kind of the new kid on the block, really in the industry, is what I've called assumed approval. And guys, what this reflects is that, yep, you need approval, but basically based upon the fact that the records owners, usually the department heads, that they've submitted their physical records into the system of record, Gimmal Physical. By virtue of having done that, they have already granted you approval so that there's no need at end of life to go ask their approval. Guys, I totally get why this has grown in popularity in the industry because of the frustration we all feel as records managers that you may have lots and lots of records ready for disposition, but you just can't get the owners to approve. Well, hopefully we have nipped that problem in the bud. Totally get it, guys. You may not be able to do this for various political and or legal reasons, depending on where you are. But for those of you that can, and we're seeing an increasing number of clients that indeed can do this, really nice functionality now that we support, known as assumed approval. No need to go get approvals at end of life. You've already got the approval when they ingested the record in the first place. All right, so have as many workflows as you want. I think logically these are the 4 possibilities, but really it's up to you. This tab will have the fields that you see, but you can create as many different workflows as you want. Let's take it to kind of tile number 2. Number 1 is a workflows tab, brand new. You're going to have the standard workflow. You can add additionals if you want to. Let's dive down and take a look at explicit sequential and look in a little more detail. When you create a workflow, give it whatever name you want. This is what I called it. Give it whatever description you want. Here's where it begins to be more interesting, right? As hence the name. If you want a sequential order enforced workflow, make sure you check that checkbox. On the other hand, assumed approval, kind of the polar opposite. No need to call something sequential. If you set assumed approval to yes, by definition, that means there's only one system provided assumed approval. So you don't need sequential processing. And for now, the workflow status, there's no logic built into this, guys, other than it's just some informational data for you if you want to use that field. However, scrolling down now, more meaningful stuff for this one workflow. Just repeating what I said a few moments ago, you can create as many steps as you want. In this particular example, for my explicit sequential workflow, I've created 3 steps, which in the end means there's going to be 3 approvals required before these records can be dispositioned. Let's use the nice little convenience control here, or link, to query those records up and jump now over to the workflow step tab. I'm going to reorder them to make it a little more intuitive in terms of 1, 2, 3. Let's dive in here and look at an individual workflow step. So when you create a workflow step, guys, you're going to tie it back to a workflow, its parent. This point is important. This step number is actually auto-generated by the software because we rely upon the step number to enforce the order of approval. Another way to say that, guys, is since this number will be auto-generated, if you're going to create multiple steps for a given workflow, make sure you create them in the proper order. If you don't, not a big deal. It just means you'll have to delete and start creating the workflow steps again. But we auto-generate the step number. For each step, you're going to give it a caption. Again, call it whatever you want to, hopefully something intuitive. You'll see where this comes into play later. And then brand new to 4.0 and Gimmal Physical in general is the ability now to begin to customize email notifications that will be going out as part of the disposition process. Now, most of you know you already have the ability to create some notifications, but they're pretty limited. They're pretty out of the box. They are what they are. We've kind of taken a significant step there in allowing you to make these email notifications more automated and more meaningful. So to that end, what we're talking about with these next 2 fields here is for people, and I'll come back to people in just a moment, but for people who are supposed to be notified as part of step 1 for a given workflow, what email will they get? You can define what the email subject line will be. You can also define what the email content will be. Quick note here, guys, in case it comes up in questions. Currently, you can't add any hyperlinks or tokens. That will be coming in future versions. Right now, it's just text-based, but nonetheless, you can see the example I put in, which I think would be much more helpful. Beyond that initial email, guys, that gets sent out when you first start a disposition batch, we've now also included some additional fields. Advanced features is a toggle. It's a yes or a no. When you set it to yes, these other fields now appear, which I have done for workflow step. When I've said advanced features yes, you can now say, you know what? I also want to configure automated reminders so that for those people that receive the notification that they're supposed to approve, if they don't log in and they don't approve, you can set the reminder frequency for how long between emails before they get another email. Similar idea here. You can set the subject line and the email content. In my example, I simply just added exclamation points to what the original email said. So all of this now baked in to each individual workflow step. There's some other information here that's not super important now, but convenience links that show you currently what boxes and or files are related to this particular workflow step in the process. What I do want to do, though, is go back a step to the workflow and call out one other really important point. These workflows here, in addition to that stuff I already told you, I'm going to scroll down a little further and highlight something critical. Guys, this is related to what I said up front in terms of just kind of component number 3 for the workflows, the record schedules themselves. When you create a workflow along with its associated steps, In the end, you really haven't done anything, because what you need to do to make this effective is tie the workflow step combo back to one or more record schedules. I'm going to go ahead and use the convenience link here to jump over to the record schedule tab and show you the two schedules I've associated it to. You'll notice here's the two that are using explicit sequential. Another way to say that last point there, guys, is your record schedule tab will be exactly like it is now, with one addition. We are now adding a workflow field, which points back to the workflows tab for every single record schedule. And getting ahead of myself a little bit, what that then means in turn, guys, is any boxes or files that are associated to these two record schedules, when it's time to approve them for disposition, they will follow the rules that are set up per the workflow that is designed here. Let's come back full circle almost. We'll come back to the workflow tab one more time. Jump into explicit sequential. Use our convenience link again to go look at the workflow steps, those three, and call out one more point in terms of the foundation here. Let's just jump into the first step in explicit sequential. Scroll down a little further this time and call out this control right here, the approver's control. So guys, what this allows you to do is for each step of the workflow, you can tie one or multiple people to that step. In turn, that means when it's their turn to come in and approve, they will automatically be notified. To hopefully anticipate some of your questions surrounding this, guys, individuals will only receive one email when it's their turn. Even if there's 1,000 boxes, they're going to get one email indicating to them, we need you to log in and do what you're supposed to do, either in terms of approving or rejecting these boxes, these records, as part of the disposition process. Now, it is the case, let me give you just one variant example. Let's say you've got 100 boxes that are in a workflow and they are eligible for disposition. And we're really on, let's say, step 2 maybe. And so for step 1, the approver came in and only approved 50 of the boxes. There's another 50 he has not yet approved. When he approves the first 50, approver number 2 will get an email saying it's your turn. And then when person number 1 goes back in and approves the other 50, person number 2 will get another email. So they could get multiple emails based upon what approver number 1 has done in terms of their approvals. Now, I know that's a lot of new information for you, but guys, those 3 tabs taken together, workflow steps, and retention schedules, they form the basis or the foundation for how we're now going to execute the disposition process. All right, with that, let's just pivot a little bit now. Let's jump over to the boxes tab, and let's jump into the retention module. On the whole, guys, the retention module is what it has been for quite some time in terms of the basic layout and functionality, but we've added some really nice bells and whistles to this. Again, virtually all of this based upon feedback that we received from you. Now you can see in my demo app, I've actually got multiple batches in play here. I'm going to make it a little easier on everyone. Let's just focus on a single batch. I'm going to focus on batch 9. And let's take a look at what is the same and what has changed. What is the same, guys, like it's always been for years and years and years, when you want to initiate a new disposition batch, and you can kind of see what I did here back in April of this year, 2 in the afternoon. I took this date, 1/1/25, I put it into the target date field, and I clicked on the execute button. And when I did that, I was saying, hey, Gimmal Physical, go identify all of the boxes that are eligible for disposition. However, what has changed now is this. Number 1 is this batch description text box. It's always been the case that Gimmal Physical would auto-generate a batch number for you. Not a lot of magic here. It's just a one-up number. It's the next sequential number that's available, but it's a way to aggregate the records into a batch. What we've now also added, when I started this batch, besides letting Gimmal Physical auto-generate that number, I actually typed in 2024 batch. it now carries along with that batch number throughout the entire process. So, for example, on the boxes tab, whereas you've always been able to query by the batch number, you can now also query by the batch description. It's just another piece of metadata we've added, in my example, to the boxes tab so that you can query by it. Something else that is new is this new checkbox, promote to new batch. And this is indeed what I did for this example. Let's say, as you briefly saw when I landed on this page, you've actually got previous batches that have not been completed. Usually because you can't get those end users, those owners to approve. And so you've got stale eligible records hanging around. Well, if you so choose, what you can now do is say, you know what? I don't want those records lying around. Any records that have not yet made it all the way through the process, if you check this box, guys, when you start a batch, it will move them from whatever batch they were in previously to this latest batch, in this case, batch 9. And it's important to note, along with that, any approvals or rejections, which we'll get to in a few minutes, but any approvals or rejections that were already placed upon those will move forward into the new batch. We're doing that because we don't want the poor owners who provided those approvals or rejections to have to do it again, because they don't really care what batch number it's in. They don't want to be asked repeatedly to approve or reject the same record. So know that by default, if you click this, we will move those approvals and rejections forward. One other big change to mention here, guys, is this filtering capability. Now, for my demo, I didn't use any filters. I just ran it across the enterprise, which is what I like to do for demo purposes. Totally get it. Some of you don't want to do it that way. You want to filter the batch. Here's what's available to you. If I open up the show filters, you've always had the ability to filter by organizational unit, right? You can use this control, and then rather than running it across the enterprise, you can run it for one or more departments or organizational units. So that filter, always been there, still there. Second filter, this one's been around for a couple of years now, but not super long. You can also, especially designed here, guys, for our clients that are geographically dispersed, totally get it. You may not want to run disposition across the enterprise. You may want to run it city by city, country by country, whatever the example happens to be. So you can now also filter by hub location or location in general. This, guys, this third filter is new to 4.0. We actually resurrected this. We had this filter way back in the day, but very few were using it. But we brought it back because there's been requests to do so. The larger point, guys, is now using one or multiple filters, any mix and match combo that you want. You can now filter the disposition process rather than running it across the enterprise. One other important point I want to note while we're on this page here is most of you, I think, are familiar with the process. You start with stage 1, it goes to stage 2, aggregation. One additional change we've done here is when you are at stage 2, notice I've highlighted that radio button for stage 2, and this would be before stage 3 was created. You now get this additional little toggle that pops open that says, okay, now that you're ready to move those boxes to stage 3, which is the final stage for actual disposition, do you want the software to autofill the actual destruction date? Or if you uncheck that box, you're saying, nope, Gimmal Physical, I do not want you to do that. I will fill that actual destruction date myself. It really is, in air quotes, right, the right way to do it, because usually it takes a while for that shredding truck to show up and actually destroy the records. But we're going to leave it up to you. You've got this toggle via that checkbox right there. All right, so foundations, workflow steps in the record schedule tab. The beginning of the process here and the management of the process here, the same as it's always been, with a new filter and some new capabilities, options, if you will, as part of the process itself. And now the part that I think maybe I'm most excited about. And again, guys, I know a little bit I'm preaching here to the choir. It's just so difficult sometimes to get the owners to approve. So unless you're using the assumed approval flavor that we mentioned up front, where you actually still got to get someone's approval, we want to make it as easy as possible for those end users to do so. To that end, guys, what we've done, and I've got it, here we go, my dashboard. You've always had a dashboard, nothing new there. But what's brand new for 4.0, guys, is we've added a whole new panel to the dashboard specific to dispositions. For those of you that are not familiar, every user gets their own dashboard. It's always done things like it shows each user what's checked out to them, what requests they have submitted that have not yet been fulfilled, and some other shortcuts. Now there is a dispositions panel. I will tell you there are two variations of this dashboard governed by security rights. We won't take the time to go there today. I am logged in as an administrator, and what that means is I get to see these three links in this column. Every other user will have this user link column with these three links, as well as the data down below. Let me just process what's on this dashboard for you to kind of work through it. I will tell you my own personal opinion here. Generally speaking, this is the power link. This is the one you're going to want to train your users to click. What it provides, and if you recall back in my email notification, the verbiage I used there was basically, hey, you, Mr. or Mrs. End User, log in, open up your dashboard, and click on this link. What this link will do is it will populate on the Boxes tab all of the records for which it is their turn to approve disposition for eligible, in my example, boxes. Now, you can be a little more granular down below. I don't think most of you do this, but for those of you that do, you'll notice here for batch 9, because I had multiple workflows tied to various schedules, and there were records under those schedules, some of those wound up falling under this particular workflow, owner approved, and some fell under explicit sequential. Another way to say all that, guys, is if you wind up only having one workflow, or if every time you run a disposition batch, there's only one workflow involved, there's really no need to use this data. But for those of you that have multiple batches and or workflows in process at the same time, you'll notice here, these links do the same as this one, but they are now specific to a given step within a given workflow. Notice the nice little counts that are here. The reason there's admin links, guys, is because as records managers, generally speaking, these links are not for you. You're not the ones approving, but these links for you as administrators, they let you kind of get some insight overall. Okay, what records, and the links are hopefully pretty intuitive here. Show me all the boxes where I'm still awaiting decisions. Show me those that have been approved, but we just haven't clicked the final button to destroy them. And then show me others that have been rejected. Now go ahead and click on one of these links here. I'll just click on query all boxes, awaiting your disposition decision. Again, this would be specific to every user. Notice it brings me now to the boxes tab. And rather than you having to query this page in some way, you simply use that convenience link on the dashboard to bring into focus those records that are awaiting for this user to provide their approval or rejection. To that end, the question becomes, okay, great, Tim, how do they do that? How do they provide the approval or rejection? Pretty significant change here. Up until version 4.0, you had to use either update or bulk update. And in all honesty, we kind of squeezed the disposition functionality into the update functionality. It really didn't properly belong there. So what we've introduced now, guys, is an entirely new function associated to its own security right called disposition decision. In the end, it is still providing an update, but it's a very specialized type of update that's specific to the disposition process. So here's the idea. When the end user clicks on that new action menu choice, disposition decision, it brings them to this page, which for those of you familiar, kind of similar to your search and replace functionality, where it gives you the option of saying, okay, if I had selected records on the previous page, which I didn't, which is why it says 0, or I could choose the selected or everything that was ready for me to disposition, that number there. There's an email that can be provided because this does run out of process. This can take some time. So you can supply an email so you're notified when it's done. But really, all the end user has to do, guys, is come down here and say either I approve or I reject and provide any optional additional notes they want, and then click on that execute button. Again, what we're trying to accomplish here, guys, is make it as easy as possible for the end users to play their part and provide the approval or the rejection. By the way, most of you are familiar, in previous versions, all you could really do was approve or do nothing, or in some kind of circuitous way, you could provide additional notes saying, I'm not sure what I want to do. There was no explicit rejection. This is a brand new feature, again, based upon feedback that a lot of you have provided, now at your disposal to approve or reject. When a user clicks these buttons and clicks the execute button, what does that produce? What does that look like? To that end, I want to focus your attention now on a new field in the application called retention status. It so happens I've configured it to put it into my quick search and in the homepage grid. You don't have to do that, but to save some time in the demo here, I've made it pretty obvious. We actually have had this field forever, but on the whole, it was of little use. It was kind of just a deprecated field that supported a much older way of how we did retention. Well, we've resurrected it, and we're now auto-filling that field with various values. Again, I won't have time to get into all the meanings of the values right now. You'll see all this in the documentation. But what I want to call out right now is when it says in progress, like this record right here, what that means is it's in a batch. At least one person has come in and approved or rejected. And so to that end, I want to bring you to the view page for this record to show you kind of the new control we now have on the boxes or the files. Let me scroll down to it. This guy right here, this workflow approval. For those of you that have been using your Gimmal Physical or Infolinks application to process dispositions, you had something like this, but we've kind of just ramped this up in terms of functionality. Pretty self-explanatory, but let me walk through it nonetheless. Based upon the record schedule, which in turn is tied to a workflow, you will see reflected how many approvals are needed on this particular record. If it's been partially approved or rejected, you'll see that reflected here. You can see Larry Seibel. He selected, I approve, back on April 22nd at 3 in the afternoon, and he added some additional notes. As the other approvers come in, again, if you choose using the email notifications, but I want to pause there for a second, guys. Don't really want you to rely upon the notifications. They are a really nice little add-on. Really what we're trying to steer you and your end users towards is that dashboard. Because in the end, that's what the email steers them towards anyway. Go to the dashboard, click on the convenience link, query up easily the records that we need your approval, and then choose approve or reject for as many records as you want. Anyway, eventually this grid will entirely be filled, indicating that the record has been processed all the way through. The corresponding retention status will indeed change depending upon where the record is in process. That, guys, on the whole, is the new disposition functionality. The end of the story, I'm just going to briefly mention it here, guys, hasn't changed really a whole lot. Back in the retention module itself, as the approvals and or rejections come back in, and again, let me filter it one more time to just batch 9. As these come back in, you'll click the right buttons on this page, which will promote of the original 876. Turns out in my demo, I've only fully approved 45. They get promoted to stage 2. Eventually, your records custodians, be it offsite or your own warehouse personnel, they do what they're supposed to do. You come back in here, you click a couple more buttons, brings you to stage 3, the disposition. And the last point I'll make here, guys, all of you have a disposition notices tab. On your disposition notices tab, these data rows that you see here are auto-generated by the software. And along with that, each of them gets their own little PDF report. Now, it indeed has been the case, except for just a select few of you, that paid lots of money to get custom reports designed here. You could not customize these reports. They are what they are, or they were what they were. What you can now do, and I need to manage your expectations a little bit, unlike all the other reports in Gimmal Physical on the reports page, we're using a companion utility, Microsoft Report Builder. You can actually customize those all by yourself. It is still indeed the case. These now can not be customized by you, but Gimmal Client Success can customize them for you. So at least we've got that option that we can customize them for you. It is on the roadmap to get it to a point that you'll be able to customize these reports by yourself. Let me give you just one quick example here of the approval. It's only changed slightly, the reports that you see here, from what you guys had in your previous versions. Last little quick point I'll make. What you can change on this report is what populates the description column. In my example, I kept it very simple, just using a barcode. But this column, guys, actually will reflect the quick description construct, so you can actually concatenate as many fields in there as you want. Now, there's other little nooks and crannies we could talk about, but on the whole, guys, that is the new disposition process. Going to turn our attention now, Marcia, and if you would help me out, to questions that have come in either in the chat or the Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Give you a breather. Give you a minute there. We do have a couple, with a few questions actually. First though, before you rest your brain for a minute, I'm going to share the results out. I think people can see this, but you had mentioned this during your talking, Tim. The most frustrating thing about the disposition process, overwhelmingly, is securing approval from records management. So probably not a shocker to most.
Records owners, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Records management is always ready. It's the records owners
Records
that are
owners,
problematic.
correct.
Yep.
Okay, so Tim, first question is for Megan. Will the standard workflow, let me pull this over here. Will the standard workflow still work for boxes that are not assigned to a schedule? She says, we don't currently use the schedules function for the most part. When we initially migrated our boxes, we were just assigned destruction dates from our old software through the override destruction function.
Man, Megan, that's actually a great question. So a couple of answers to it. As part of the migration process, I think I called this out. Let's just make sure I did. All of your schedules will migrate. We will actually default the workflow to standard. So that is now going to be set up. But indeed, it is the case if you have boxes that have not been tied to a record series, but they still have a scheduled destruction date, either because it was part of migration or populated. That's a great question. I don't think we actually considered that. So I think as of today, the answer is no, in the sense that that dashboard, which we're really excited about, will not be of as much use to you. So a great question. We'll take that as a note. We'll make sure we address that properly so that we can accommodate boxes that are not tied to schedules. Great question. And I think there was more to that question. Is that right? I'm looking.
Let me go back.
No,
I
maybe not.
moved
Maybe that
it.
was it.
No, it was, yeah. She just gave you a background on
All right, good.
previous case. Okay,
Good.
so,
Great
and again,
question.
I apologize. I don't know if you can see these, Tim, so I will read them. From Peter, this came in, you were about 15, 20 minutes in. The question is from the last point, which I'm not sure what that was, about when the first approver approves 50 boxes out of 100. The
Yep.
second approver will get an email for the first 50. Is that dependent on the number 50, or is this would happen even if approver number 1 only approved 25?
Yes, I'm going to answer it just using slightly different words.
Okay.
Every time it's someone's turn to approve, whether it's 1, 25, 50, or 1,000 boxes, they will get a single email saying, it's your turn. Again, that email will be based upon what you configured on the workflow step page.
Great, thank you. Okay, here's another. What happens if step 1 approver rejected the batch, Does the step 2 approver get notified to approve?
Nope,
Does
nope.
does a records manager, staff get notified, or anything else happen?
Okay, so eventually, not as today, it's on the roadmap for those rejections to also include some kind of automated notification. That's not the case today. But let's come back to something I briefly skimmed through here. This new, not exactly new, but newly used retention status field. This field here, guys, let's actually update one of these guys. And forgive me, I didn't check this ahead of time. I think I've got him on the update page. We'll find out in just a second. Not you. Okay, I do not. Let me see if I got him on the create page. All I really want to call out here, guys, is one of the values that's in retention status is rejected. So you will be able to query either, remember the dashboard, guys? You can always, where's my dashboard right here? As an administrator, you can always just click that link to see any rejections across the enterprise. As an administrator, you have that link. For individuals, if they want to see what they've personally rejected, they can click that link. But what you'll also be able to do is query by retention status equals rejected. Let me check one more time on the create page. Yeah, sorry, I didn't. I'm not blind. Yeah, so didn't configure it to show up on those pages, but you can do that, and I think we'll find out in 1 second here. Yeah, so because I have it in the quick search, I can query by here rejected. So to answer your question, no, there's no automation when it's rejected, but you can query by it to see what's going on with these rejected records.
Okay, thank you, Tim. All right, another one from Peter. The question is, I know it's possible to upload approval reports, but not possible to delete the ones Gimmal auto-generates. Has that changed? Can auto-generated reports be deleted in this version?
No, that particular functionality, Peter, has not changed. It's a
Okay.
good comment, though. I know that's in our roadmap somewhere, but because of the relationships between those reports, data records, and other records, what's known as referential integrity prevents us from doing that. There's ways to get around it, but we haven't taken that step yet.
Thanks, Tim. This one's from Susan. Is there different final disposition types in the new version? For instance, destruction and archives.
Yes, and well, the answer is yes. I can't remember in this demo app. Let's jump over there and find out if we have any. Okay, bear with me for a minute. While I'm kind of just fooling around with the interface here, you can have a field called disposition type. You can put any data you want into it whatsoever. For example, it can include destroy or archive or any other values that you want. The automation, however, of the software, yeah, there we go, disposition type. Let's just pop him in here. The automation is tied specifically to schedules where destruction or disposition is what you're wanting to do. And I know I've had this conversation with someone recently, I forget who. So forgive me if I'm repeating information for some of you. Let me query up all the schedules. What you're able to do, whether it's permanent, which is actually structured for permanent, it means you're not going to destroy it, and there's no time frame associated with that. That prevents it from being destroyed. What I was looking for here real quick, guys, I don't see if I have one, if I got to transfer to archive, right there we go. So what would happen here, I'm using disposition type, I called it transfer. You can call it whatever you want. It could say archives or transfer to archives, whatever you like. But there's sort of an additional step you have to take in that when you have a schedule which on the whole is designed to keep records permanently, meaning transfer them to archives, what you will do is you will associate a hold to that particular schedule, which I think I have in this demo app here. And indeed, this right here, this hold is in the application tied to the schedules that are archive-based schedules. And what that does, guys, is it prevents records under that schedule from entering into a destruction batch. There's a little bit more to that story, but currently that's how we accommodate records that are not going to be destroyed, they're going to have a disposition type something else, which typically means transfer or move to archives. By the way, the additional question sometimes comes up, well, Tim, I've got a schedule where some of the records go to archives and some do not. That's where you would just drill down a level. You can query up those records that need to go to archives, and using bulk update, you can associate this hold directly to the boxes rather than to the schedule level.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Another question from another Peter. Is it possible to apply a legal hold to a box that is in the workflow? Do the other boxes in the workflow continue on?
Yes. If you apply a hold to a box, regardless of where it is in the process, that stops it dead in its tracks. It would still remain in the batch. You'd still see batch 9, batch 24 description. But now that there's a hold on it, it will not promote to the next phase of the disposition process, which means it will not hit that final stage of being destroyed. It won't affect the other boxes whatsoever.
Okay, great. This one's from Ricardo. Could the same workflow process be applied to folders instead of boxes?
Yes, Ricardo, I've kind of oversimplified here to save some time, but everything I just told you about boxes, same exact thing for file folders, if that's the level at which you execute disposition. There's just not that many folks that do that anymore. Too much work.
True. This question's from John. When you don't check the promote to new batch checkbox, what happens? If a box is in a previous batch, will it be included or not be included in the new batch?
No, it stays in the old batch. It will not be included in the new one. So to answer your question, what happens, kind of tongue in cheek, nothing. Nothing happens. That box just stays exactly the way it was in whatever batch it was in previously.
Okay. Question from Lewis. Is there a way to collapse the feature to be able to work with the data or information panes below? If not, this may be a nice UI improvement in the future, allowing users to collapse the searchable once calibrated to focus on the results or data. Does that make sense to you, Tim?
No, I'm trying. Are they able to come off of mute?
Yeah, let me see if Lewis is still on here.
Yeah, help me out, Lewis, if you can.
Lewis, I allowed you to talk if you don't
Hey,
mind.
Marcia, no worries, and thanks for your time, Tim. Sorry, I didn't really have the best way of typing that out, but I guess the search, on the various menus within Physical, you can search all sorts of different fields, which I think was great. But something that kind of popped into my mind, would there be a way to maybe collapse like that barcode in this screen you're showing right here, collapse that so you can really focus on some of the data, like if you're looking at a
Oh,
bigger set. I'm
thank
not sure
you.
if that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Lewis. Thank you. Good question. I'm gonna give you a couple of answers. One answer is yes, with a little
Mhm.
hesitation inflection there. In that, didn't specifically call this out, but we are trying to get better at screen real estate. One of the use cases there is this left-hand navigational panel, right? For you guys in older versions, your tabs are at the top. Now they're on the left-hand side. You can now collapse, and we fully expect everybody will do this eventually, right? Eventually, you're going to know what these icons are. You don't need the words. You simply collapse this. So that's going to gain you some real estate. It's also been the case, and I don't have enough fields in here to really show it to you, and I'm not going to take the time to do it. Starting 3 or 4 versions ago, uh, if you have a lot of data here in terms of columns that goes off to the right-hand side, the checkbox and the first column, whatever your first column is, are static. It's kind of like locking the rows or the columns in Excel, if you will. They stay locked. But I think the real gist of your question, Lewis, is can I just dynamically collapse, resize some of these columns? The answer, unfortunately, is still no. But we hear not only you, Lewis, lots of
Mhm.
others have requested this. That is on our roadmap as well to make these grids much more user friendly in terms of drag and drop functionality, filtering capability, and just collapsing all together. So, a couple of answers to your question.
Awesome. No, thanks so much.
Okay, Tim. A few more here. This is from Will. Can I select all records schedules and select all approvals in just one workflow step? Then approvers see only their destruction eligible boxes in their disposition dashboard. I don't need a new workflow for each organization or schedule or approver? Question mark.
Yeah, if I think I heard the question right, let me say it back to you and you can correct me when I go wrong here. Because we actually believe this will be the majority of our clients, that first of all, you're only going to have one workflow. That is, regardless of box or schedule, whatever it happens to be, you always need the same number of approvals. There's no variation. We know this historically, that it's the minority of our clients that need varying numbers of approval. It's usually the same process regardless. If that's your case, then the convenience link for your end users will be this one right here. They won't even really need to worry about, in fact, the data down here will not be helpful really at all, because they can simply click on this. And what that will do is for any boxes in any batch, in that one workflow that you have that where we're waiting for their approval, it will bring all of those up. And I'll click this again here. It will bring those records up onto their home page grid, whatever the number happens to be. And then they simply use that single action, this new action of disposition decision. And again, just to show you once more, this is where hopefully, ideally, they say, yep, it looks good to me. They simply leave it at approve, add some notes if they want to, and click on execute. And they can wash their hands. They are done. If I didn't understand your question, please come back at me and help me do a better job.
Thanks, Tim. Another question, this is from Susan. Is the disposition type an option on the record schedule filter in the retention process?
Yeah, great question. So yes, but I'm going to broaden the question a little bit here. You can use, let's jump back into the disposition module. When you're using any of those filtering controls, open those up again, you can filter by any of the data elements. Now, I don't know, let me scroll down here for schedules. Yes, I don't have it that way right now, but you could have disposition type as one of your search fields here so that you could search by disposition type and then filter by the resulting schedules of a given disposition type. And that's true of however you want to filter by any data element whatsoever.
Another
That's
question.
actually a good idea. I'm going to add that to my demo. I'm glad you asked that question.
Great. This is from Peter. Once the hold is removed, does it continue on in the workflow no matter how long the hold was in place?
Yes. Well, it continues on the next time someone in records management clicks the right buttons to promote to the next stage, or until the approvals come in that we're waiting for. Nothing automatically happens when the hold is removed. It just makes it ready should the right people click the right buttons.
Okay. All right, this one's from Robert. He joined a little late, so in case we missed this, but he asked, if you're using disposition workflow for boxes and approved disposition, will it automatically affect any or all folders associated in the boxes, or do you need to run a separate workflows for the folders? I think we do.
Great question, and actually not even related exactly to what we're talking about here today, guys, in that functionality has been within Gimmal Physical for quite some time. There is some variation, but the default behavior, generally speaking, is that if you execute disposition at the box level, any file folders that are within, when you disposition the box, the file folders go along with it. They also get destroyed. Sort of related to that, although there's a preference that governs this, if you put one of those files on hold, there's a preference that allows you to say, if I put a file on hold, should I put its container box on hold? So if you set that preference to yes, then yes, that entire box gets put on hold because there's that one file within that has the hold already on it.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Couple more. This one's from Christina. Can you run disposition on boxes that are not part of batches? For example, as archives processes boxes, they purge non-permanent records, update the box with updated series and approval information, and the boxes are just added to the next destruction truck and then marked as destroyed.
Yep. Everything we talked through here today, guys, is the right way to do it. It's the system of record. You're getting the proper audit trail, but you can always use these powerful features here, right? There's bulk delete. And if I come down a little, I think I may have turned it off. Let me see if I've got them down here further. That bulk expunge. You can use either of these bulk features, which bypass that whole process, right? So if you're like, you know what? I'm not worried about getting approvals and have that recorded with the actual person's name and the date, timestamp, and all that. I just want to get rid of some boxes. You, as a records administrator, you can use bulk delete, which I would recommend you do, because you'll notice there's also a bulk undelete. And really, what we intended the delete function for is records that were viable, real records, but they met their actual end of life and they're now gone. Whereas the expunge functionality, we really put it into the product years ago to clean up erroneous bad data. But it's your call. If you've got your security set that either of these functions are on, you can simply, first of all, do whatever updates you want to indicate, okay, I'm putting this on a shredding truck on such and such a date. Put that into any fields you want. There's already a baked field called hold retention comments where you can just put any extra information you want. You can do that. And then you could do your bulk delete, because once you delete a record, you can no longer update it. So the order of operations is important there. Make any updates you want and then do your bulk delete. Or if you're really brave and crazy, use the bulk expunge.
Okay. One more question, Tim, and that looks like that's going to be a wrap. The question's from Tracy. Specific approvers are tied to a specific step in a specific workflow, correct?
Correct.
So if you have different approvers based on different record schedule items, do you need to set up different workflows?
No, great question, guys. Forgive me for not calling this out more explicitly. One of the really cool things about the logic with the email notifications, and what we actually, at least I expect this to happen. Let's jump back over to the workflow steps. We'll just grab one of these guys here. I expect things like this for a given workflow step, rather than my demo where when I got 2 people, we expect there to be 50, 100 people here, because the logic in the code of the application will be only those people who have boxes that they're allowed to see and it's their turn to approve, only those people will get the emails. So err on the side of putting too many people in here, because they're only going to get the email if they can see the box and it's their turn. So no, we don't anticipate you creating separate workflows for that. Just pack these approver controls with the people that you need to.
Okay. Tim, I forgot, we had one question on the pre-registration. Quite honestly, at this point, I'm not sure if you answered it, but are disposition approvals still captured in the audit trail as updates?
No, I did not explicitly answer that. And it's a yes and a no. So let's come back, show you that. We'll go back to the boxes tab here. And I'll go with this guy right here. Show you what that looks like in the audit trail. It is captured to the audit trail. It is captured as an update. So it's still, we're using that word, but the details are significantly different. And if the gist of the question is, well, man, I'd like to somehow segregate it from your normal update, you'll be able to do that doing this kind of thing right here. You can say, okay, well, I'm just not interested in, and I could even make it even further. I could say, well, yeah, I want the updates, but only where the word workflow is in the details. So now you're going to see in the audit trail just those disposition workflow approval specific steps. But it is still an update. It still falls under that broad category of an update.
Follow up to that, Tim. The follow-up is, but doesn't allow different roles to have different rights?
Different roles can always have different rights. So I'm not sure. There must be more to that question.
We could follow up.
Yeah, it might be related. Remember, guys, users are tied to workflow steps. So they will only be able to approve or reject at the step to which they have been tied. If that what was meant by the different rights. Not sure though.
Okay. I know we can take that later. I know we are getting we have 1 minute till the hour. How about that? So that being said, Tim, I think we did have a deck originally.
Oh,
If you,
yeah.
if
Let
you
me come
still
back.
have it, let's just we'll wrap this up. And gosh, thank you everybody so much for joining. I think it's the one more slide.
No, that's everything I got right there.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, just wanted to point out that we have another Gimmal Physical education series on June 19th about conditional field display. The ones for Q3 are being worked on currently, so stay tuned for details about that. But really appreciate everybody staying on longer for this session. Tim, thank you so much. This was really, really educational, of course. Appreciate it. We have a good group that still stayed on the whole time. It's recorded. We'll send out the recording. You can always check out our YouTube channel for past sessions that you might have missed. If you have ideas for future sessions, please do let us know. But we thank you again. Have a wonderful day, everybody. If you have more questions on this, feel free to reach out to myself. I can always get Tim on the side and we can get your questions answered. Thank you so much. Have a great day.